Let's do some questions. Someone's asking, is assignment simultaneously? Can you swap the values with a comma b equals b comma a? No. You don't really want to define that kind of thing anyway. Because when you get too picky about what order things happen in cases like that, you prevent optimizers from doing things. So I would not use a comma b equals b comma a to swap values. That'll either generate a equals b semicolon b equals a, or b equals a semicolon a equals b, neither of which will do what you want. So to swap things, you want to do a real swap. What is my reasoning against using multiple sets of varargs? Is it difficult to implement well? Okay, I didn't mention that necessarily. I thought about doing multiple sets of varargs, and it didn't seem to make that much sense. I don't think it would be too hard to implement at this point. There might just be an hour of programming time on the compiler or something, but I'm just not sure there's a need for it. But yeah, I thought about it, and if it's something a lot of people want, then it's funny. Like, I don't know how many programming languages have multiple varargs in the world. We could do that. What about having varargs with the overhead of any type pointer and value pointer? For example, if I want to do maxiv, whatever. I'll think about that. I mean, last time when I introduced the varargs, some people wanted, type specified varargs. Maybe, I'm not sure. I feel like we have to see how they get used. Let me hold on. There we go. It's hard to freeze the Twitch chat sometimes. So someone said, how about a default keyword for use in argument list to indicate the default value if one is available? I thought about that. I don't necessarily want to eat an extra keyword if it's not necessary. And with named parameters, it's maybe kind of not necessary. Because if you put default in and you're not using names, you're still vulnerable to the kinds of things that happen when you go start editing that function that has lots of default parameters, right? You're still vulnerable to, hey, it had 2 default arguments, and then I deleted one, and now you're saying default for the second one, which was actually the one, actually you would have needed 3 default arguments for that to work, and you were only using 2 of them, but the point is the same. So when your code invisibly breaks in bad ways, that's bad. And having default didn't seem to prevent things from breaking in bad ways. But as always, it's easy to add. So if it's actually really useful, then we can do it. Oh, I didn't quite finish answering the question about the overhead of any. I'm not sure. Here's the thing. I don't use varargs very much in C++, simply because they're so horrible in C++, right? So my personal coding style uses them only when absolutely necessary. Now, given a language where varargs aren't so horrible, I might use them a lot more. So it's not clear to me, I'm basing all my design decisions on this language on kind of what I would like and what would be useful to me. And trying to make varargs work more in a performance kind of way doesn't make that much sense to me. I feel like if you want really high performance, you should know how many arguments there are, because any function that's dealing with unknown conditions is going to be slower than a function that's dealing with known conditions, right? So that said, like I mentioned a minute ago, I don't know what I would want to use varargs for in a language where they were better than what they are in C++. So my thought on that is just to have them available in the any version, as you see now, and use them for a while, writing real software, and then just see for real what is good about them, what's bad about them, whether I want to use them in performance critical situations. I don't think that I would, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. Keep in mind, though, that you probably don't take any real big performance hits for the any version of things. In a case where, I'm calling you and you're a varargs function, and I'm passing 3 variables, my addresses are right there on the stack. And I probably just use them. You're not going to take a cache miss, right, from dereferencing that pointer on the any to get to them. So it's more like some instruction overhead, and that's not nearly as bad as memory overhead. So I don't worry about it too much. I feel like it's in the sweet spot right now. But like I said, I might be wrong, and I might want a different sweet spot later on. Oh God, I forgot to split the stream. So this is going to come out as one big stream for people on Twitch. Sorry, people on Twitch. So someone's saying, hey, when you specified 5 arguments to a 4-named argument function, the error is specified 5 when 4 when expected or something. Wouldn't it be clearer to say specified name twice? It might be, yeah. And in fact, you might want to say both. That's really just a matter of which condition you check for first, honestly. In the way that I wrote the code, I checked the number of arguments before the other thing. And if I move them around a little bit, you'd get the other error. So yeah, good return values are important. I also don't want to spend a lot of time rat-holing on good error messages, not good return values. Good error messages are very important. I don't want to spend a lot of time rat-holing on maximizing error messages yet, simply because the language is still changing a lot, and those error messages may change a lot. But I do want to ensure that I have the capability to make all the error messages good, which means the compiler should know about what context things are happening in, right? You noticed in some of those errors, it would give you the error and then give you related context that might be important, right? So the ability to do that is crucial. And then whether I happen to do it as well in every case is a smaller problem that can be dealt with later, I think. Can the caller specify a subset of named return values? That was an interesting thing that I thought about, and there wasn't a good way to do it yet. Maybe I just haven't thought of it. But so there's a sort of a symmetry in calling and returning, right? So when you call a function, you can specify the names going in, and when returning, you can specify the names going out. But right now, as the caller, there is not a way to specify the names coming out, right? So like you can't, if I'm saying AB equals fun4, I can't say like A, like what would the syntax be? It might be A equals second, B equals first equals fun4. Like that doesn't read well to me. Maybe it would work better if there was a totally different syntax that didn't use equals for name specification. Like if it was colon, if we didn't use colons for declarations and we said A second, B first, that might make sense. It's a lot of name juggling at that point, but that might make sense. And maybe that is fine. The thing is that only works if your caller, or if the function you're calling named all of its return values anyway, right? Which it may not have, because that's not, you need to name parameters, because if you can't use a parameter, it's useless. But you don't have to name return values. So this seemed like a thing with limited utility, but it's something I'm thinking about. If it's cool and makes the language a lot better, it'll probably get supported somehow. Someone asked a related question. How do you access a specific return value from a comma separated list? Right now, you don't really. So because of what I just said, you pick how many you want, right? And you take that many. So, but hopefully, like I said, the culture is that return values should be optional. And so hopefully the designer of the functions that you're using thought about what are the most important things and what are the least important things. And hopefully the most important things are returned first and the least important things are returned later, right? But like I said, you have to kind of let these features, you have to just let them shake and be used and see what happens. And so all this stuff that I'm presenting right now, in fact, everything that you've ever seen that I've presented on this language is in fact the preliminary version, and all of it is subject to change to anything that's better. What do I think about querying the default value of an argument? Yeah, like I said, that kind of default I don't necessarily know is a good idea. However, there's a more generalized version that I've thought about that's maybe more powerful, and that's not like a default keyword. I don't want to spoiler what it is yet, because if I ever demo it, it'll be cool. So I've thought about that kind of thing. Yeah, and we'll see. We'll see what people need. Do I plan to support overloaded functions as an alternative to variable argument functions? Yes. I'm pretty sure when I started this language, I wasn't sure if we were going to have function overloading. I kind of think it's almost absolutely necessary at this point. I mean, especially if you want to do operator overloading, right? But why should operators be different from functions anyway? So yeah, I'm pretty sure we're going to do operator overloading. I just haven't done it because it's not like a killer feature that is amazing. Like, you know what that looks like from other languages. If I can figure out something about it that's more amazing, then maybe I'll be excited to do it. But in the meantime, I'm generally just trying to proceed in terms of the most powerful features first, which is why compile time function execution went first, because I felt like that would influence the shape of things that got designed later, and that turned out to have been correct. For example, next demo, we're going to use compile time code execution for some things that you would not suspect we would use it for necessarily. After I demo it, it'll be obvious, but prior to that, you won't necessarily have expected it. So that's all cool. And so, yeah, stuff like, there's stuff where I've mostly decided, like, yeah, you know, default or overloading is going to happen, and I just haven't done it. You know, namespaces are going to happen somehow. That's good, but I haven't really done it yet. I sort of started to do it, and then I'm not really using it, so it doesn't really exist. So we'll see. Someone's asking about initializers. How would you initialize vector3 concisely? I don't totally love initializers in C and C++. I feel like they have problems. Maybe those problems already will have been solved within the framework of this language, but maybe they haven't. And so initializers are not that important. I mean, you want to have them in a shipping language, but for now, in terms of going in order of most powerful features, that comes way later, I think, because initializer is a syntactic nicety. So I'll think about that when the time comes. But the reason I did all this stuff is because I needed multiple return values for next time. And while I was doing multiple return values, I might as well do everything that impacted on, like named values and whatever, because I wanted to make sure all that stuff worked well together and didn't paint myself into a corner. So that's why all this other stuff happened. Someone is trolling me about what do I think of a line of C++. Am I planning on going full-time on this when the witness is winding down? For at least a little bit, yes. And then we'll see what makes sense. I'd like to have a team on it, like a professional team of people, if it makes sense, if funding is available and all that stuff. So we will see. So someone's saying, is must limited to just function returns? Is there anywhere else where it could be used? I've only thought about it in the context of function returns. That's the only way it's implemented right now. I don't know if it makes sense for anything else. I don't know. Would I consider a supercomma that evaluates the expressions in parallel? Well, this is not like the C++ comma or the C comma, right? So comma in C is an expression operator that evaluates things, I believe, from left to right. This comma does not specify order of evaluation, and in fact, it's not really evaluation because comma is not an operator, right? It's a piece of syntax. So it's already a super comma, I guess, is my answer to that. If I understand what you mean by super comma. Except, I mean, if what you really mean by super comma is you want something that forks threads and does all the arguments, I don't think that would be the right syntax for that kind of thing, because that's a heavyweight operation, and you don't want a lightweight syntax for a heavyweight operation, unless a heavyweight operation is very, very common, which I don't think this would be, but maybe. Have I considered putting these example programs in a gist or haste bin so people can read them? Yeah, maybe. I mean, the thing is, the syntax is going to change at least one more time. Like I said, the pointer syntax is not going to be caret anymore, and that's probably going to have a snowball effect and change some other things. The reason that it's not going to be caret is that's bad on some European keyboards. So maybe a little later. And in fact, we need a couple more giant features to happen before that, I think. So, eventually I'll put the compiler and all the programs up, and people can just, like, why would you want to read through source code that you can't play with, right? Like, if you can play with the source code by running the compiler on it, that's better. So that's sort of what I've been really thinking of, is working toward the time when I could release the compiler. Releasing the source absent the compiler is not so exciting. Someone's asking about native VR support. VR support is not a programming language feature. It's a library feature. An alternative to multiple return values is output arguments. I did think about output arguments, and I wanted to try multiple return values. That was the thing that appealed to me. I want to be clear about what's going in and what's coming out. I feel like that leads to clearer programs. If it doesn't, if this ends up being some kind of a syntactic mess ultimately, or being confusing, then we could try out parameters. That would be fine. But I felt like when I sat down to do this stuff that this was the right way to do it. Someone is saying the current comma syntax is confusing for someone used to C or C++. That is probably true, but you know what? I don't care that much. All other things being equal, I will use things that are close to C, C++. Like I won't diverge from those for no reason. Or for a flimsy reason, right? But if something looks like C or C++ but has a different meaning, then I kind of don't care, because either you're using this language for real or you're not. And if you are, it doesn't take very long to get used to these things. And if you chain yourself to C++ syntax, you're in for a load of trouble, because you'll never be able to do anything good, because it's so weighed down with horribleness at this point. So this language ultimately will not really look that much like C or C++, but I'll try not to be confusing unless there's a good reason, and I felt like this was a good reason. I think it's obvious as soon as you see A comma B equals fun of whatever, that's really not the comma operator that's in C. That's clear. So the question is, what is it? So I don't think it's a big deal. What happens if you pass a function that returns two values as an argument to a function that expects one argument? I covered that at the very end. The expression value of any multi-return value function is still just the first argument, right? So you can think of the other arguments as either being ancillary or informative or whatever. Like I sort of said, I don't like the way dependencies ripple if you start chaining a bunch of function calls together and then change the guy on the inside to have a different number of multiple return values. It didn't seem like a good thing. But that said, I don't have experience anymore. Like I have 20 years of experience programming in C++. I have 0 years of experience programming in this language. So I want to get that experience and then make further decisions based on experience, right? So that's a kind of thing where that's a little bit of an arbitrary decision based on what I think is going to be best. If it's not best, it'll change. Someone's asking dynamic loading of other DLLs. We already dynamically load DLLs. Like that's how OpenGL support and all that, right? So if I do our old Space Invaders program, which was the first real program from the first demo, this is rendering graphics by loading an OpenGL DLL that's on the system. And in fact, when I do printf and all this stuff that you saw during these demos, that sees printf that I'm loading from a DLL. And there's some other C thing, or there's some other functions like array manipulations that I actually happen by calling out. So DLLs already happen. That's fine. Are there any other hash mark directives? Yeah, there's a bunch. You'll see some other ones if you look through earlier videos, and you'll see some more next time. We've got some good ones for next time. Regarding discarding additional return values, Common Lisp had the same feature, so you might want to research whether or not that turned out to be a good choice. Maybe. The thing is, Common Lisp is so different from this that it's hard to draw conclusions about it. It's really far on the programming language spectrum. It's not as far as like Prolog or something, but it's pretty far. So it's hard to judge conclusions because the goodness or badness of a feature depends on its context with other features, and it depends on the programming style encouraged by the language as a whole. So, yeah, man, I don't know. We'll see. I'm not sure that I can conclude. Yeah. It looks like we're out of questions. I'm out of voice, so I'll be happy if there are no more questions, but I'll give another minute or so for any serious questions to come in. Can I pass a function with one default argument to a function that expects a function pointer with 0 arguments? Currently, no. If you start thinking about what that really means, it gets complicated because, like, let's take a simpler case. If you can do that, then maybe you can, if there's a pointer somewhere, like on a struct or something that expects a pointer with 0 arguments, maybe you can just assign your function to that, right? Whether that really is going to work or not depends on the calling convention of the language, which, if you care about speed, may depend on your particular CPU architecture. So I thought about that when I was doing this work, and you start getting into territory that's a little bit unfamiliar with me, right? To me, I mean. Like, there may be There may be cases in which you need to know the exact argument spec in order to successfully call a function. I don't know. It's outside the realm of my experience. So for now, the answer is no, you can't do that. The only function pointers or argument types that'll work are the ones that are exactly the same number and types of arguments. However, it might be much more expressive to allow you to do the other thing. And you could think of ways for that to happen. Maybe if we decide that the language supports that and your particular CPU architecture for some reason doesn't support that, maybe we auto-generate a tiny wrapper function that like thunks up to your real function and that works. I just didn't want to do that yet because it's unclear. But it might be useful. It might be cool, right? I don't know. What is the type of a function with named argument? Are the arguments part of the type? No, they are not. So you can have two functions with different argument names and they are the same type if everything else is the same. Can I pass it to a function which expects a function with arguments the same name but in a different order? No. So types are still by order. Again, maybe that'll change at some point, but again, you start getting into weird issues. In fact, I think I feel confident in saying no on that one forever, because to say yes, you would have to sort arguments alphabetically or something in order to be maximally consistent, and that's weird. Like that just seems like something that's weird, and you're asking for trouble. But again, I don't know. Like again, we have to start looking at really low-level code generation issues to really know what is a good idea there and what's not. Can default arguments be allocated on the heap? Right now, they have to be constants. I think I restricted them to constants, and the reason is just because you want to be super clear about the context where something runs, and right now, the context of that default value running would be in the return statement, which is maybe fine, except if it's an implicit return because you did something to like, well, there's no such thing as an implicit return. Well, there is if you fall off the end of the function. I don't know. Like it didn't seem like that good of an idea. So right now it needs to be a constant. Whether that's a label that is defined as something constant or a different constant. It can't be math that you do or functions that you call. What are my thoughts on package managers a la Rust Cargo? I think you shouldn't really need a package manager, honestly. Like, my goal when it comes to that kind of thing is to make it as dead simple as possible to get code and use code. And that doesn't mean adding facilities to do all these complicated things that you have like in Linux package management. It means make it so that you almost don't have to do anything to use code, right? If you're familiar with Sean Barrett's STB libraries, you can look that up, STB. They're C libraries that are mostly in the form of a C header file and maybe a few source files, although I believe it's the earlier ones that are in source files, and as he proceeded onward, he packed more and more things into a header file where possible. So to use libstb, all you have to do is include a header file. It's kind of awesome. So you don't need a package manager for that. You just put it in your source code and you're done. And that is by far the most effective form of code reuse that I've ever seen. And that is what I'm aiming for. I don't want to give people more tools, right? So if you look at if you go back to the first demo, where I demoed compile time code execution, part of the motivation there is to get rid of tools as much as possible and use your core tool of your language to do as much as it can, right? So get rid of IDEs, get rid of make files and make files and whatever the hell. Like all that stuff is usually garbage, right? So, and if you can't completely get rid of it, at least minimize your reliance on it. So that's the philosophy. So if I don't need a package manager, we ain't going to have one, right? We're going to have a much simpler way of sharing code. That said, if it turns out that there's a great volume of code and people want to share all these different versions and whatever, and a package manager is the best way to do it, then we'll do it. But it would be something that I would reluctantly do. It's not something that I would be, oh yeah, package manager, awesome. Like, no. No, 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 no. Do I plan to still be compilable to C? We'll probably always be compilable to C. It's just whether that's the default way that you would use the language or not, right? If you can compile into a C program, then you can, you can run your place on architectures that we don't support, as long as you have a C compiler on that architecture, and that's useful. That's nice. All right. I'm going to get out of here, folks. Thank you for coming. I want to do a new demo before too long. For a while, these demos were pacing one a month, and then I sort of said they would be less frequent, but they've sort of turned more frequent. They're kind of every 3 weeks now. I don't know why that is. And the next demo may be even sooner than that. It may be in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. We'll see. Because it involves some features that I'm kind of at least halfway done with already. This demo was the stuff I needed to do to keep building those. So we'll see. I'll have a new demo for you guys before too long, unless my plane crashes or I get hit by a bus. Goodbye. As always, if you want to ask questions or leave comments, you can email this address, language, I almost typed Lagrange, language@tekla.com. This is not a mailing list. It goes straight to me. And it's for serious discussion of either things that you see here or other ideas that you have about programming languages, or your language that you made, or some other video that you saw that you think is informative, etc. So thanks for your attention, and I will see you before too long. Good night.